What role do you think art plays in life? What meaning do you think art brings to life? For you, speaking only for you, what role do you think art brings to your life, and what even also in general too, as you see the world of art? What what meaning is art in life essentially?
Hmm. I think for me, and this obviously is influence on the way that I perceive and make art. Again, is to experience beauty, and maybe even more than beauty, because that feels very limiting and very conventional. Maybe the point of art in life is catharsis, because I think that with music, for example, it doesn't have to be a pretty song or the most beautiful orchestra, whatever. But if it propels something from you, and sometimes that's all that you need while you're struggling with your romantic life or taxes or your stupid fucking boss. You need to put your headphones in and shake it, or open your sketchbook and plunge your pencil into that. So maybe catharsis, I would say, because as humans we need an outlet.
All right, ready? Three,
Yes. 2, 1.
one. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Jeoffrey Sarpong podcast. Today,
Thank you for having me.
of course, of course, of course, of course. Today I'm here with Chloe. Chloe, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am very, very good. I'm so happy. I know we were talking about it before, but the weather today has got me in such a good mood. And I think this is perfect to be out here in and amongst this. I don't even know what to call it, but it's a beautiful set.
Vegetation, London vegetation.
Perfect. But in and amongst London vegetation and just being here with you today. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining me today. This is a conversation I've looked forward to ever since that we met.
Likewise.
Thank you. I think you're an amazing artist. We'll get more into why. I think we'll get way more into that. But before we do that, let's start properly. Could you introduce yourself a little bit, weaving in your artistic journey, and just give a brief summary of who you are for us?
Well, first of all, thank you for your kindness, as always. Well, where to start from? I would say, first of all, I'm from Italy. I was born in Turin. What else? So, yes, I was born in Turin. I'm from Italy. The kind of family where I'm from, I would say like it's perfectly split in two. My mom is from the south, so I was kind of like brought into that kind of culture from south of Italy. And my mom is the artistic one. And meanwhile, my dad is the most more analytical kind of person. And also he basically grew up in 3 different countries, in 3 different continents, actually. And so I kind of got the more international setup from my dad. Was very lucky to travel a lot when I was younger, again, because of him. But when I say that my family was split up, it's because literally my parents were divorced. And so I kind of like lived this duality, or like this dual reality between my mom and the Italian culture, and my dad's the more analytical parent and a more international setting. I'm mentioning this because I don't really know where my, I don't know, artistic influence came from. My mom is definitely the artistic one. She was the one that taught me to draw. She was the one that she still knows how to draw. She went to fashion school, but she didn't pursue it professionally. So I honestly have this memory, like everlasting memory of drawing since I was a child. Like I don't remember not drawing, if that makes sense. In a way, it's because it's kind of like the activity that you give to a child to do when you need to pass your time before iPads were a thing.
Thank God for that.
I know, right? Not to sound old or anything, obviously. But yeah, that was the activity that you do after school, or when like I have this memory of my mom cooking in the background and me painting or drawing or whatever. So for me, it always felt like this natural activity that didn't feel like homework, but also didn't feel like it's not like, I don't know, your parents telling you to do piano lessons, you know? For me, was that very natural thing that you just do, kind of like play.
Yeah,
right?
natural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then obviously you grow up, you go to school, and again, I've always had this thing in the back of my mind. And you have to know that in Italy, and I think it's a really good thing actually, you can specialize or choose a specialization into a specific subject from high school. So I was lucky enough to get enrolled into this fine art kind of high school. So how it works, you basically have all the subjects that everybody studies in high school. So, Italian, math, chemistry, the basic one, English, obviously. But mine on top had basically fine arts. So that entailed drawing, life drawing, sculpting, and you kind of have other kind of basics that you do on your first 2 years. But I already knew like I want to do fine art. I want to do this kind of like old looking thing, like traditional art, copying. Like I remember very fondly about, we call like the hours of drawing, of observational drawing, where you would just have this massive block of 3 hours, no break. And I was looking forward to it so much, of just going there, putting my headphones. It was a very untraditional school. Like as long as you would get your work done, you could have your music on. So everybody was listening to music or whatever, and you would just work for 3 hours straight.
Wow, you didn't do anything else. You just.
We literally had a naked life model in front of us.
So how old were you guys?
We were 16. And that's like the 3 years, because again, the first 2 years are more like base level. So you learn the basics, and you kind of they want you to know roughly, because then from the third year, you specialize within the specialization.
Okay, yes.
So in the first 2 years, you do drawing, sculpture, but also you have a little bit of technical drawing in case you like to do architecture in the future.
Yeah.
And that's it. So from the third year, you can do fine art, which is what I picked. Architecture, or like something that prepared you to that, I would say. And then graphic design. Or at least that my school was set up like that. There's another school, for example, that from the third year you specialize on fashion design. So it's more of like it's an artistic high school.
Right,
exactly. And that's the name of the kind of high school. It's called artistic high school. So yeah, basically once you specialize from the third year and you pick fine art, you know that you're gonna have the naked life model. And I'm telling you, everybody couldn't wait for it. Not because of the naked element, but because for us, and I think still now it's pretty much like people pay money to go to life drawing classes here in London, especially. Because having a life subject in front of you, it's so special. Like you want to do so well. It feels like, you're actually paying homage to the craft and the model. Before then, you practice on statues. Like we have those, they're called chalk copies of statues, which is kind of cool because they're 1-to-1 copies of real art statues. So you have, for example, a bust of the David from Florence. So you don't have to go to Florence to copy it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's just for practice.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's way easier to copy a statue than to copy a live, breathing human being. I still remember our model. Her name was Angela, and she was a gorgeous woman with those like super long silver hair. She was a life model for that school for like 20 years or something.
God.
You would have portraits of this woman from students 10 years ago, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's amazing.
She was like,
she's like a story.
a veteran of that school. And I'm sure that if you ask people from the school, how's Angela, they're gonna know, they're gonna remember her. But yeah, that was one of the most fun memories I have of that place. A little bit less of math hours, for example.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all,
You are
glitters.
from before, I guess, yeah. What age did you start like knowing? Obviously, so you were doing it from very, very young. What age did you know that actually, or is it such a thing where you were doing this for so many years that you don't even know when you start to fall in love with it?
Yeah, there's a difference between, I'm in love with this thing and I like to do it, to let me pursue it as study or even a profession. Because I think when you change from middle school to high school, yes, I was kind of like, so wait, because I just remembered with the mentality of a 14-year-old girl, I was like, as long as I don't have to do math,
I just want to do this 3 hours block forever.
Yeah, because you have to know the other ones are, you have the math one, which is hyper scientific, obviously. You have the one focused on classical subjects. So you have Latin and Greek and Italian. So you focus on literature and languages. You have the languages one. So you study 3 languages like English, Spanish, German, whatever. And in that one, you study Latin as well. So very, very difficult. And then you have the ones focused on human science and psychology. And that's usually cool for people who want to do therapy or become a teacher, because usually that prepares you to pedagogy and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the artistic one. Naively, I thought clearly the artistic one is not going to have math. So I'm going to go for the artistic one. Also, it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Of course, yeah. You want to be an artist.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I didn't have the realization. It's not like, that's the thing. I
don't want to do this. I want to do that.
Exactly, because I didn't have yet the delusion of, when parents ask their children, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever said, I want to be an artist. That's the thing. It was hard. I had a realization to come to because I knew I liked to draw. But at the same time, I was brought into this environment where, again, my mom didn't pursue arts. So clearly, I'm sorry, but she wasn't the parent of being like, go and be a creative as a profession, because it's not realistic, right? And my dad, he's this cybersecurity coder engineering guy. He does photography as an amateur, but I never had this type of parent that is like my mom values the arts, but again, not as a profession. So I was very much conditioned as a child to say, I remember this clearly, I want to be a neurosurgeon or I want to be a lawyer. And I think a little bit is also like the approval of those professions, just because, the social standing. But also I was like, this is cool and this is like, sounds intelligent. And drawing, for some reason. Doesn't make any sense, right? But whatever. Again, I want to go to art school because no math.
Yeah.
Jokes on me, because still you have to do math for 5 years, not even 2. So I hated that. Even if it was only maybe 2 or 3 hours a week, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, I don't know why I'm talking so much about high school.
No, this is amazing. This is good. This is your history, the backstory. So please go on.
I think it was at the end of high school, because also you have to know this. Lots of people pick, again, because you choose when you're quite young, when you're 13. You may pick art school because you think art is cool or you like drawing. But then lots of people, after that, they go to study other things, because if after art school you wanted to enroll into medicine, nobody's gonna stop you, right? So I remember clearly having to make this decision, as all my other classmates, of, do I want to be one of those person that continues drawing? Even, let's forget the discipline, let's forget the profession, just the act of drawing. Or do I want to keep it as a hobby? Because to the moment that you enroll into, let's say, psychology, you're gonna be a psychologist that draws. Do you want that? And man, I went for that course for 1 semester. I enrolled into linguistics, because I was like, what's the next thing that I like after art? Languages, I guess.
Yeah.
I liked it, not loved it. I liked it. But when I was meeting people, I was like, hi, I'm Chloe, and I draw. And it made me realize, why do I care so much? Why is that so tied to my identity if I kind of gave up on it? Or at least I thought, or at least I tried. And so after a semester, I was like, no, I can't do this. I must do art. I don't care. I don't care if I'm going to spend the rest of my life as a broke artist. I guess I must do this, because anything else, even if I become a successful doctor, I will feel like a fraud, you know? So I drop out, and I drop out in February. I have this very intense, period of confusion. And this is where my cousin comes into play. My cousin from my dad's side, so from an international family of mine. She's the cousin that lives in London and has been living in London even back then. And so she comes to Trin one day and she's like, Chloe, I think you should come to London. And she was the only one that was seeing me scribbling in my diary as a pastime, as a joke, or my homework, as something to cultivate. Because again, I, as an adult, or like as a point of reference, I had nobody in my family that was seeing the potential of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody was being either very realistic or like more grounded, or, you know, you just don't see it if you don't come from that field.
Yeah.
My cousin comes from that field.
So she knew.
And also she knew the reality of a city like London, which is very different from the market, the job market, especially the creative job market in Italy. And so she tells me that, and I'm like, wow, is this actually something that I could make?
Had you thought of coming to London before? Or was this the first time you're thinking about it?
That's the weird thing about life. Like, I've always fantasized when I was little, because again, with having my dad as a reference point,
Yeah.
of him living abroad, growing up abroad, traveling constantly, speaking English in the household, like it was like normal, you know. I was like, okay, definitely I want to move out. Like, definitely I want to leave Italy someday. And I remember when I was 14, I was very much fantasizing, for example, going to Amsterdam for some. I don't know why Amsterdam necessarily. I think I did a road trip with my dad once, and I was like, I want to live here.
Yeah, this is it.
So I definitely imagine myself living abroad. But I never had this thing. It's not like I had this thing of my dream is to move to London. I actually never considered that, which is funny because my dad was born in London. Like, my dad was born in London, then he grew up and went to school all around the world, basically. And then when he was in his 20s, he came back to Italy with his family. And then he met my mom. So funny enough, me and my dad, we kind of exchanged.
Place.
Because when in my 20s, I moved back here.
Yeah.
Which is very heartwarming for me, especially at the beginning, because I was like, I'm in the place where my dad grew up as a kid, as a teenager. So literally, I meet my cousin in April. I take this decision in April, and by August, I was here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You decided like that?
Yes, I had to decide like that because by September, I had to enroll for uni. And because I already dropped out from the previous semester, I was like, I don't want to waste another year of my life.
Yeah, you wanted to do something.
Waste, it's a harsh word, but you know what I mean? It's like, I didn't want to feel like I was wasting my time, basically. And so I was like, okay, if I have to do this, I have to do this immediately. I literally spent those months between April and August of preparing my portfolio, preparing all the papers, preparing, looking for a place remotely as well. I remember when I was, everybody in London knows the experience of looking for a flat in London. Imagine looking for a flat in London, not being in London. I was like, so can I please book a viewing in 2 months?
Can I do an online Zoom viewing?
Yes,
I can see the window.
Actually, I didn't do video viewings.
That would have been bad.
Yes.
Because it would have just completely...
horrible. But somehow I managed. And I managed to get a place in a university. And the thing is, with uni, I was like, okay, you know what? I did 5 years of traditional arts. Now I want to do all the stuff in visual that I don't know. And all the stuff that I don't know and I never tried are all digital based. So digital painting, digital media, photography, graphic design. Like, I want to do all of that. So that was kind of like the course that I picked. I didn't want to go into fine art, for example, painting, because I already did that. Funny enough, now I kind of like, I'm going back to that. But in a way, I'm glad because as people, I guess, can assume from my work, I tend to mix the two practices. I tend to mix the two foundations, I would say. And that's where I gain the most fun of, honestly.
That's amazing. That's a really good endpoint too, because that was one of my next questions too about... So first off, thank you for that. That was an amazing through line into your history.
Yes, sorry.
There's so much more, I know. You could have went on so much more, but you did very well to keep it as succinct, but also as broad as you can. Because I think it gives us a very good broad general art view on how you got here and how your love of art was started very young, but it was something that you just kind of did. So it became kind of a thing. But that moment you decided where your cousin was like, okay, do you want to move to London? That must have been a pivotal moment. On the back of that too, you come in here and you learn all these different styles of art. Now you're kind of like, you're making that choice, you're making that jump into becoming, this is something I might want to do for the next couple of years, rather than something I want to do against something. This is actually something I'm for. Talking about those two different, so in art itself, you said you talked about art. You talked about oil painting and then learning digital painting. So that's something I'm almost learning too, the differences. The difference between digital painting and oil painting, obviously, right? I see more digital painting now because of the social media and the area that we live in. But also, I love oil paintings, going to museums and stuff like that. What's it like for you? What's your experience? What's your development and your history with those two different types? And on the follow-up question to that, how do you think going ahead in the future, the industry is going to turn? Is it turning more towards digital painting, or do you think oil painting is still the foundation of painting itself?
Okay. So to answer the first part of the question, um, it's hard to explain because I would first need to understand how much people know of digital painting or in general, like digital manipulation, right? Because usually it's very simple. Like you have a white canvas and maybe, again, if you know Photoshop, again, it's very similar.
Yes.
A white canvas and then you have layers.
Yeah.
So obviously the convenient thing of digital painting is you can fuck up as much as you like or as much as you want or as much as you need. And you can always go back, you can always erase, you can always start. The beauty, though, of paper or canvas or like traditional mediums is you gotta look in. Like once you do something, you're like,
it is it.
Yeah, it's it. And if you want to start again, somehow your other work is never gonna look the same as the second one. So it's frustrating, but at the same time, the challenge just locks you in somehow.
So let's start with digital painting now. Okay. Let's go into depth with that. Okay. So digital painting, as I understand it, is layers, right? So when it's like you mentioned, example of Photoshop, and just layering different types of art on it, and then on that layer becomes a painting itself. But you can go back and you can go back on the layers. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of digital painting?
First of all, I would precise that when you paint on a layer, considering that you're painting on a layer on top of the background color, the canvas, it's pixel on nothing. So it's all about strokes. It's kind of like the same way as a normal real life paintbrush. Because obviously, if you're using vectors, you're not painting, right? So when we're talking about digital painting, I mean like the actual use of a digital brush and strokes and color. And it can be a stroke of a pencil if you're drawing or a stroke of a paintbrush if you're painting. Because I do think that sometimes people think of digital painting or digital artwork as, oh, well, like, especially now with AI.
Yes.
I think people just like
press button.
Exactly. I just and I paint a background, right?
Yeah.
But it's still very much painting. That's one of the reasons why I still love it.
Yeah.
Coming from a traditional background, like, it's still very much like having to do the first layer of color, and then you do kind of like the differences in contrast, and then you build up yourself to the details, just like you would do with a normal painting.
Yeah, of course.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it makes sense. Okay, so that's the explanation.
Yeah.
What are some disadvantages?
Disadvantages. It is very hard to feel real, and this is one of the challenges that it actually made me fall in love with digital. So maybe it's not a con. I don't know.
For everyone else,
let me explain. If you come from a traditional background, and you do your first paintings, it looks very flat. Like it looks very unalive, right? And so maybe another example I could do is if you do a sketch, just a very rough pencil on paper, and then you do the same sketch, and this is so frustrating, the same sketch, or you try sketching on an iPad, it will never look as good as a normal sketch on paper, because especially that style that is very disorganized, very dirty, very like rough and messy, on digital, it just doesn't do the same. It just doesn't come as well. It looks very like wonky and like you're trying to make it messy, if that makes sense. So I think one of the hardest things is to make digital look natural, or to make digital not look dead, flat, or like...
That's a skill in of itself.
Yes, because otherwise, again, the con of digital is that. The other con of digital is You may be spending hours and hours on something, and it doesn't give you the same sense of I made something out of nothing than holding a painting in your hands. Because it's pixels. Like, if you think about it, unless you print it, sometimes you get that back once you print and you're like, oh, okay.
It's here in your hands.
Exactly. Like, I made this. And you get that real life sensation. On a screen, it does feel intangible. Which is not as satisfying as an actual piece of paper, which is, again, the advantage of traditional. It's empty. It's not real.
It's not real. Speak on that more than like that, because I think you're describing something that's like inexplicable about painting on like canvas with oil painting. What is it? What is it about that? What is it about the process of painting on oil canvas that you yourself love, or that you like are drawn to?
Of painting on oil.
Or painting on oil, yeah.
It's literally the opposite, like the cons.
It's opposite.
Turn into pros. Turn into the fact that it's very tangible. It's very real. It's you see. You're kind of manipulating matter.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. That's amazing.
Because especially with oil, which is very much. I don't know if you ever use oils.
No, I haven't. No.
First of all, it stinks.
Yeah. Oh, really?
It's literally toxic for you. Like,
you guys just like Scotch.
Yes, exactly. It's literally a joke in the community of like, I would probably die 40 of respiratory problems because you breathe that stuff in, you touch it, you burn your skin. Yeah, it's horrible. But apart from this very unpleasant smell, when the color comes out of the tube, it is very much like almost like clay inside. Unless you dilute it. If you dilute it, obviously it becomes liquid paint, whatever. But obviously that's your preference, that's your choice. Each artist has its own way to work with the matters. But it is very much like matters. So some artists even sculpt with it, because if you're using a very thick way, again, it's like manipulating a paste on the canvas. And again, that sensation of the materiality of it in front of your face and on your hands. Something that unfortunately with digital never have. Again, another pro of digital that is a con of traditional is with digital I can paint anywhere, in any place, in any time, on the plane. I love painting on the plane, and I can imagine myself with a Ito, Ryanair, Brainsy.
the smell and everything.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. So it is more accessible and digital, and then but with canvas, it's more kind of like real and like you were saying, tangible. Let's now zoom into your kind of artistic style. So I was obviously having a look at some of your art before today, and I found it difficult to pinpoint a style. Like, I don't know much about art, so that's probably right. But what would you say your style is? I was thinking, is it surrealism or is it something else? Obviously, is it something unique that you're trying to create? Talk to me about your style. What is it that you're trying to go for? What is it that you hope people see from it?
You know, it's interesting that you said, like, I don't know what your style is, because honestly, neither do I. And in a way, I don't, like, I think now I'm kind of like getting there. But for the longest time, I was like, I don't know what my thing is. It's true that usually with artists that kind of made themselves whole, have such, the whole point is they have such a distinct style that it's recognizable, it's clarifiable, it's describable. I think I'm still getting there.
Yes.
And at the same time, when you say, like, I don't know where you fall, I agree with you, because I do think I kind of have, a dichotomy there happening. I have my more serious, academic, acceptable, more effort put into it type of style, type of art. And then I have my silly squiggling drawing of a flower guy with a tiny penis coming out. Like,
I will talk about that later. So then that's also funny and amazing.
That's the thing. Like, I kind of like to do both. I think at some point I was like, why do I have to choose? Like, it's kind of the same thing with the digital and the traditional. I was like, why do I have to pick between the two? I really enjoy doing both. I'll just do both. And the same has been with my style. Whatever I want to do, I'll do it. And then I just discovered that at the end of the day, the more you do anything that comes into your brain, the style has a way to make itself recognizable.
Absolutely.
Because it kind of happened to me a couple of years ago with a friend of mine went like, oh, that's kind of like your style. Like when you do like the red background thing. I was like, oh, I do that. But it's so crazy. I don't realize that I do it until somebody tells me that's you or that's your thing, kind of. Or that reminds you of your style. Because before that, you just don't see it.
Yeah, 100% agree. So when you mentioned that, actually, the fact that to just do things that come out of your mind, it becomes something you get used to almost, right?
Basically.
I had that same kind of realization in poetry too. Like, because it was like, the more I did it, the more I realized, oh, okay, this is something that if I allow it to happen, you know, I think it's also linked to the creative process. Just another question I want to ask you too. Because for me, my process is like idea. I remember talking about this with you. It's like idea that comes from anywhere, and then letting that idea channel an emotion within me, and then that emotion will spark the words, and then refinement of those words to make sense of the emotion. So it's like a whole process where even I don't know what's going to happen until the end of it, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of what I was going for, kind of.
But also, you crafted that process yourself.
Yeah.
That's the thing I like. Nobody gave you a book like me, like, this is your process.
Yeah.
You made that for
You make
yourself.
it yourself. And I think that's because in search of a style,
Yeah.
we kind of think, okay, none of this is working. Like, I have to find something that will make me to do this more easily, almost, more kind of naturally. And so you do what comes naturally towards you. What is your natural creative process? What is it that you find that comes naturally towards you for you to create?
Okay, so obviously depends on the kind of work. If we're talking about my more silly characters and stupid,
We do both. We do the silly stuff.
we do both.
Yeah.
Yes. If we're talking about more those kind of exercises, because for me it's more like a creative exercise. I don't take it. First of all, it helped me to not take myself too seriously, because I think for the longest time I was like, my art has to be so like, you know, but that would bluff me.
Yeah.
And again, it was kind of, I think my cousin, like, this was like a couple years ago, telling me like drop it, like just do stuff and whatever. So that to me is an exercise, and usually that starts very spontaneously. Like, first of all, I try not to be too focused, so I usually put music on the background, a movie, a podcast, somebody talking to me. I always joke about the fact that probably comes from the fact that as artists, you're so used to sketch or doodle while your teacher is at your class.
So you just learn from a kid, it's like, oh, just tune it off and just...
I promise you, in very rare occasions, I've been drawing in dead silence. You know what I mean? Like, I need somebody to talk in my ear, me not listening.
So just yeah. No, I can understand why.
And sometimes it's just a thing of allow me to use this word, like, to fuck around. And you're like, oh, well, that looks like I don't know, like something. Let me do like a weird thing on it. Obviously, sometimes I do have some inspo references or things that made me go like, and I try to play with it. But it's more like, again, it's more like a unserious, playful exercise to kind of like get my mind going. Then when I'm more in my like serious moods of like a serious work, or maybe for a commission, so I don't have time to waste, basically. Most of my work that comes from that practice comes actually from photography. What I mean by that is, I've been doing photography for fun since I was in high school. Because for me, in high school was like, I don't want to do homework. I'll take pictures. I don't want to draw.
You were allowed to take pictures instead of homework.
No, the thing is, I wanted to procrastinate.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't for school. That's the whole point. It wasn't for school.
Yeah, it's fair.
So it was more like...
I was like, that's a very lucky homework that you guys have, but no, sorry for interruption.
No, don't worry. No, it was just me, like, let's back on with it. Also, my dad was doing photography, so obviously I was curious.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let me take pictures, whatever. But actually, that exercise, and again, I never thought of becoming a photographer. For me, it was just like, again, for fun. But actually, that exercise of, for example, taking pictures every day, even just on my phone, that kind of was my way to leap into conceptual work or conceptual art. So right now, I still have much fun with my photography by doing conceptual photography. But then sometimes when I'm taking pictures, I'm like, wait, that would be a stick painting. Or maybe I'll take one element of the photo, or maybe the whole composition, but then I'll put something in the middle. And that's the case with the David in Ruins. I was literally in London Fields. There was this really empty a place with like, work in progress, and there was like construction works or whatever. I looked at that, took a picture, and I was like, how sick it would be if a giant statue would be there.
For no reason alone.
And I don't know, that's just sometimes how I get ideas. And when that happens, which is not very often, when that happens, I feel very lucky because it's like I had to put no effort into it and the image kind of came into my mind. Sometimes I have to put a lot of effort into it because I have no ideas or I just don't know what to do. But in that case, and this has been my fix for the past year, so it's a bit of a new method for me, is to draw stupid stuff.
So it's the balance, right? It's the balance of doing whatever creatively you feel.
Yeah.
Because that just kind of like sparks your creativity, keeps you flowing, keeps you going. And then when it gets to serious, it's like, okay, what strikes you? What is actually something that is meaningful and speaks to you?
Yeah.
So on that, David and Rira is actually like, let's jump ahead to that question. So, because I saw the different stages of progression of the art that you saw, that you showed. So obviously you showed it just kind of bared the sketch, then it progressed. And then you mentioned somewhere how it was like, it kept, like it was difficult because it was like, you have to keep kind of like tweaking it or refining it. What's that process like? What's the process of refinement? Like, are you always like trying to look for the image that you first saw when you were out taking a picture? Is that what you're seeking? Why so many refinements do you think it took?
It's so hard to explain because this is the frustrating bit. So for the actually the David is a perfect example because for the Davids, I saw the location. I have the picture of the location, right? But I kind of saw the statue. I was like, let's put a statue there and see what it comes out. And obviously, as you asked me before, it's like, would you call your art surrealist? Maybe it's not surrealist, but I definitely take inspiration from surrealism. And I would love to dive more into making surrealist work. So yeah, that's an element of surrealism, right? So you have this vivid image in your mind. You do the sketch. And my first sketch, actually, it's in a pocket sketchbook in pen. And it's so literally just lines, right? Because I had the image. Then you do the sketching on the iPad and you still have the image. And you're like, I know the colors, I know the sky. Like I remember on the sketch, the one in pen on the paper, I remember writing like, has to be pitch blue, which doesn't mean anything. But in my mind is like, when the sky has that like very dark, dense, saturated blue, no clouds. Statue. I think the statue was white at that point. So I was imagining this like full on bright sun, when it's like 1 o'clock.
Yeah. So you're imagining like a whole image. Obviously, exactly. Yeah, you're imagining the whole image.
You have the whole image. And then the more you progress, so after the sketch, I add the contrast, the gradients, and that's still black and white, I'd say. Then you start adding hues and values. So you start the color. And usually, I was saying with that one, I think I start with the sky because I already had the shade of the sky in mind. The more you progress, the less you have the image clear in your mind.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's getting contaminated with work. Yeah. And it's so frustrating because I wish I could take a snapshot
of that. Yeah. Because now you see the work that you're doing instead of that original.
Exactly that. So at some point, I remember I had colored the statue very roughly in white.
Yeah.
White, like, let's say white.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, how cool it would be if it was actually like a blood red, like this very natural, like red marble statue because I like the country with the red and blue, whatever. And so I do it. And again, once I start adding changes are actually different from the first initial image. That again doesn't help with the keeping in mind what I actually wanted to achieve at the end goal. And so the more details you get, at some point you get to a point where you're like, I don't know if was this what I wanted to achieve? And that's so frustrating because you get to that point where it's semi-finished. Like even now, it's not even finished. It's not there. It's semi-finished. It doesn't convince me. I know there's something missing, but I know what it is because the initial image is very faded now. Or it's not important anymore because I've already made some changes. And you probably saw on my feed, like, I even changed the time of day because like maybe it's the colors, maybe it's too oversaturated, maybe it's too like bright daylight. Let me do it when it's like more evening kind of thing. Still, it doesn't work. So I went back to the daylight thing. Does that answer?
That absolutely answers my question. It just shows how it's like a right a artist's mind is, because you're 100% right. I completely agree. I often think about this too, because as an artist myself or a poet, I never know when a piece is finished. You know, I was speaking to one of my professors, and he was mentioning about how, like, you know, he says, you know, the most important thing for writers is just refinement. It's like editing. You just have to keep editing.
So
edit.
true.
So it's like I often think about. I think that's multidisciplinary. It doesn't just apply to writers; it applies to other artists. So I always ask, how do they know the work is finished? Because you can always add more, or you can take away more,
Yeah.
and there is never really a perfect. You just kind of have to just go like, okay, this is it. I'm going to stop here.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to just stop here, and this is what the work is going to be. Otherwise, you're just going to keep going and going and going, and then you might end up, like you were saying, like losing the original idea that you had because you've not taken it. But maybe even that's okay, you know. Like, I think that's the idea of art. Like, there is no really wrong. I was gonna say there's no wrong answers. Obviously, there's things that you can do that are completely out of form that doesn't apply to like what you were trying to do. You know, which means like, okay, you don't understand the rules of the medium that you're in. You know, but it's once you're in that medium, once you're in, there's no really anything wrong with that. You know, it's a question. Question I had for you is how do you think art can ever be finished? Do you think there's anything such as like a perfect piece of art?
I would say definitely yes. The point is, if you're that kind of artist that can lead that to that end result. Like if I think about the masters of, you know, art history, I'm sure they knew how to finalize a piece of work. Of course, we cannot interview them now and ask them.
I wish I could.
So, yeah, all right. But I think you can know, even in contemporary artists, I think you can tell they think their work is finished. And it does look finished to you as well as an audience. I think that's something that I struggle with. I never know when it's done. Maybe if it's done, maybe it doesn't look done. And sometimes I do like, I've been doing these charcoal studies of my finished or about to be finished paintings. And sometimes the rough, more disorganized version is more appealing than the one that is being studied and is being detailed and perfected. And so to me, I hope one day I get to that point of knowing how to finish it without ruining it. Because I do think the reason why, at least myself, I can never finish some projects is because I'm afraid of not leading to the end result that I was imagining. And so I just keep working on it, I think.
On that point, what is the most challenging piece you've done so far? Like, what is the one that took the most work to complete? And also, on the follow-up to that question, what piece have you done you think represents who you are, or represents the kind of art you're trying to kind of convey?
When you say the most amount of work, do you mean hours or do you mean
just challenging, as in like it took the most from you, artist, like as an artist?
That's a very hard question.
Take it. I mean, of course, you can take your time to think about it.
Because if I think about effort, like sweat and blood and tears, I think my dissertation project, for my dissertation for my graduation university, I did this conceptualized campaign for Simon Rocha. So it wasn't just pretty paintings. It was literally like, has to be paintings of clothes for a campaign. So there were multiple layers of it. I made a series, I made a booklet, because the idea was to make from art, make a campaign, but make also merchandising, but then make publicity.
Oh, wow. So it's like a whole...
Yeah, because this was inspired by Ignazi Moriel, which is one of my like favorite artists, number one inspirations, but also he's literally the reason why I started painting, because for years, and I'm talking like even during uni, I avoided colors like a phobia, literally. It's like I would be one of those illustrators that draw really well. So because I will detract colors from my work, it means that the line has to be perfect. And we'll only use like, you know, shadows, blacks, whatever. That's it, like line work. And then it's because of him and because of especially his campaign with for Gucci. Basically, he painted that the first and maybe only luxury campaign for Gucci. in 2018. And it's the only campaign that instead of being, again, photographs, like a normal luxury campaign is, pictures, models, editorials, and he was the first one to paint it completely. So it was only paintings.
So he painted everything, the models, everything.
Everything.
Wow.
So again, instead of having a billboard of
Well,
models,
yeah. He just painted everything.
he painted the model, he painted the clothes. So to me, the fascinating thing about that is, for that campaign, for that runway, from that collection, no Gucci customer saw a picture of a handbag or a realistic handbag, I would say, until they walked into the store. Because all the handbags were paintings of Gucci handbags.
Or his interpretation of what the handbags look like.
Basically. Even if obviously he's a good, amazing painter.
Yeah.
Everything was very
Super realistic. Yeah.
not hyper realistic, but realistic looking. Still, it's a painting with a bag. It's not a picture of a bag. And I just love that so much. And the campaign is absolutely gorgeous. Also, I do think it's a reappropriation of the role of the illustrator as an advertiser. Because before photography, we were the ones painting the campaigns, painting the posters, painting the advertising and the advertisements. Right now, that role has been totally stolen by photographers and photography, which no hard feelings, but still. So for me, it was also my way to say, look, we can still make cool advertisement, which I do think it looks cooler than photography or photography campaigns, because now it's unusual. Because again, everybody's doing that. So if you do the odd thing. Also, I also want to specify, I know obviously that illustrated campaign exists, especially if you look into corporate illustrations or, quirky billboards of very simplistic 2D illustrations. My point with Inyazi is that it's art. I wouldn't call it illustration. It's actual art. I do hate those 2D illustrations of bubbly people with a suitcase. You know what I mean? That's soulless.
Yeah.
He made art in function of a craft brand, and I love that. So I kind of wanted to do my take on a brand, on a designer that I love, which is Simone Rocha. I love her clothes. I wanted to put my own twist on her aesthetics, because she has this very feminine and nurturing and dreamlike designs. And so I was like, I think my style, I think I can do some visuals with that. And obviously, it was my dissertation, so it was, very nervous, very exactly. So it is my baby, and it was my first ever painted body of work of mine. So to me, I literally went from 0 to 100 in one project, because I went from avoiding colors altogether because I don't like colors, I'm not good at it, I cannot work with colors. I remember saying stuff like that.
Yeah.
To painting.
So not going full on.
Yeah.
Do you think that represents you then? Obviously it was the most challenging work, but do you think that also because of that transition that you made into full on becoming that kind of artist, especially kind of being inspired by one of your influences, that captures you the most, you think?
Yeah. Now I cannot imagine going back.
Yeah.
Now, if anything, sometimes I get that stimulus of I have to paint that because of the colors. So to me, it's crazy it took me so long, actually. I'm I'm so stupid of me, again. So stupid of me to let myself hold myself back.
Yeah. I mean,
because of fear.
This is artists, man. This is but that's the beauty of it. Once we get past it, we can capture it in different ways, because I've done that too. I've held myself back from my art, thinking, oh, I can't do this. It's that kind of thing in your mind. You put your influences on a pedestal. They can do it, but I can't do it. It's
so true.
And then once you do it yourself, it becomes a thing where you realize, oh, it was all in you all the whole time. All it took from you is the belief, and it's still practice, it's still work. It's still that kind of showing up every day and showing up when you can.
Yeah.
But at least you've gone past that mental barrier, and I think that's so important. Another question I had too, I think I'm fascinated by your expression and how you kind of view it. I think I saw one of your interviews you talked about. So I think the question was what do you want to people to convey from your art? And you mentioned aesthetic and beauty. So aesthetic and beauty, I think that was first an amazing answer. Thank you, because I think that's so true. I think it's so true. I think we were losing touch with that idea of aesthetic and beauty. I think in our modern era, because of corporate interest, they want to shape that for us and tell us what is aesthetic free and tell us what is beautiful. So I think the fact that you have that as a goal is really, really good.
Thank you.
But talk to me more about that then. What does aesthetic or beauty mean to you? And do you agree with the idea that he's been kind of like co-opted by corporate interest? And if so, what do we do about it?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. First of all, the best way that I can explain it, because it's not like, again, it wasn't a conscious decision of mine, like, oh, let's make the goal of my art this thing. It's just that was what moved me to art in the first place. So, for example, we were just talking about Nyazi. It wasn't the fact that I took decision, very rational, self-aware decision of, I never painted in my life, I should start painting, let's do these studies and learn to paint. No, I was just so fucking baffled by this guy. There was like, everything he makes is so beautiful. I must try. I'll definitely fail, but I have to try conveying the same beauty or trying to make it as beautiful as it is for him.
Exactly.
Which is insane, because I absolutely, I'm not saying I have the same skills. Absolutely not saying that, like, how do you even do it, right? Like, how do you even start? I have no idea. But for me, I think every artist is entitled to having their own, as you said, like, goal or ethics behind their art. And I firmly believe that not every artist has to make beauty, because I also think that's a bit of a cliche answer. It's a bit of a it's very restricted to think art as necessarily beautiful. That would be so boring. We do need ugly art, we do need political art, we do need boring art, etc., etc. So I'm not saying that my reason is, the empirical one or whatever. But that is what moves me. And I think the more I've been aging, the more I've been realizing, like, at the end of the day, I just want to make something that people find beautiful. Even if they find it shallow, even if they find it uninteresting, I think you can find something very boring but still stunning. And again, maybe it's a shallow answer, but that feels like such a challenge that makes me go like, yeah, I want my work to be seen as that. Going back on your question more on the political level, like how art gets manipulated by corporation capitalism and what do we do about it? I don't know. Like, I think it's important. We all own to what moves us.
Yes.
So, whenever I think about what corporations do with visual language, with visual messages, like one example that comes to my mind, even if we're kind of like straying away from the topic, is the joke about, like, the internet comes up with that joke, a meme, and then corporations
Take
the format and ruins the party for everybody.
Yes.
Okay, we're talking about memes. It's not that serious. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I do think it can kind of said the same about art in the sense of visual art, painting, sculpture, performance, art, theater, movie, whatever it is. Because as long as it provokes joy or movement or
attention,
attention, or it inspires people, I think that's the ultimate purpose. Whatever your personal goal is as a creative, I think ultimately you can kind of put any motive, any goal under that umbrella, let's say. And I think that's the thing that we have to protect from then the corporate greeds, which will never take away. Because as long as the goal is making money, it would always be shit.
Yes. And corporations always find a way to do the funny. It happened to Michelangelo,
Yeah.
Everything that's beautiful gets taken and just painted for more people to consume, because beauty is such a commodified thing, right?
Yeah.
I heard you also say something that was very interesting about kind of like symbols and representation. I think that's a fascinating perspective. It's okay.
Please keep that in.
Fair, Susie asks. I think it's a fascinating thing because when you think about like how you represent people, and I think I saw one of your posts, you were talking about how you were trying to represent one of your friends in just symbols, and it was just like a couple of symbols, and then you think like this is a way for me to represent. And I thought when I saw that, I was like, but isn't all art just that? Isn't art just a way for us to? Isn't art just a symbolic language? You know,
Yes.
a way for us to just kind of like kind of hint at something that's real with something that we perceive as real through our own creativity. I wanted you to expand on that idea a bit more. What did you mean by that idea? What do you think about the idea that kind of like art itself is that kind of symbolic language itself?
First of all, I agree with everything you said. Like, yes, art is highly symbolic. The reason why, for example, I made that piece of artwork is I love playing with symbols. So kind of like my idea was because art is so relies so much on symbols. Can I make a portrait of somebody without the person in it?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that's the fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
The fun of it, whether it's art or photography or whatever is your medium, is how much can I say without saying explicitly, which probably is very similar with poetry as well. Like the whole point, the whole game is I'm going to say it without saying it. And that's so fun. It's just fun. It's just good fun. And again, I think it's very fun when it's very well done in art, because then also I think as a viewer, you get to deconstruct the work.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, this means that, and that works in relation to this. And again, that's something I want to really incorporate with my work.
Mm-hmm.
I find it highly boring, at least when it comes to my work. When, maybe I put this, when people tells me, oh, you're sad? Draw yourself, cry. And I'm like, no, thanks. That's so just not interesting. Also, you don't want to see me painting that.
Yeah, no, because it was right. Yeah, it's funny though, because as a poet, it's funny for me to hear to laugh at, like, because it's true. Like everything is feeling for me. You know, I can try to make comments of society, and I do that sometimes, but literally, I'm sad. It's like sad poetry. But also, it's like you don't want to always be sad. I think that's the kind of the point you're making. It's like, don't be confined by your art. You don't want to become a caricature of your art, essentially. Yeah. One thing that's really fascinating me about your art is when I saw it, there's a quiet intimacy. It's the best way I could explain it.
Oh, thank you.
There's a quiet intimacy of your art, with your kind of characters and the people that you draw, and it's like there's that kind of sensuality also of it, how they look, or like the naked bodies and all of that stuff there. Talk to me about that process and the role of that in your art, where you were inspired by or influenced by.
That's such a compliment, by the way. Like, just to hear that. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for making the art.
I'm sorry, what was your question again?
So, like, what is it, like, basically, what are you trying with that quiet intimacy? Is it something you're trying to preserve, or is it something you're trying to kind of, like, reveal with that,
So, yes and no. Like, how do I explain this? Some time ago, like, I would say a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to, like, how do I condense this into a pill? Like, basically, I've been very blessed in the past of having deep relationships, amazing friendships, amazing love stories, and I would be forever grateful for that. So, once those chapters of my life pass, first of all, I am a person that is grabbed by the anxiety of forgetting, like, as a chokehold.
That's good.
Like, there's no other way that I can describe it. It's literally like the angst of forgetting stuff. So that's the reason why I take pictures. That's the reason why I tend to write. or at least I try to as much as possible. Because the more you do that, when you look back, you realize how much you have forgotten, but you didn't know until you reread some certain stuff or you rewatched certain stuff. So I have that element of fear very much present in my mind. And so at some point, something clicked in me that basically made me realize, like, maybe I should, like, use my art as an effort to remember. And so I kind of dipped a little bit more into my personal experiences and memories and things I didn't want to forget and people I loved. And again, I hate being explicit. So, for example, I say the classic example of you go through a breakup. I don't want to paint about breakup. I would try to kind of like steer away and avoid that thing altogether. And I mean, I'm glad that at least apparently to you, the intimacy elements arrives, because that's exactly what I want to encapsulate. I want to encapsulate the intimacy of lovers, or the intimate silences between two people that really know each other, or that softness of your sister sleeping next to you because you guys didn't know each other for all your lives. And again, that's so hard because there's no manual on how to do it. And I do believe that, again, there's no point of painting the exact memory. Somehow you have to provoke that without doing exactly.
Absolutely, and I agree. And I think 2 points actually. First, about the anxiety of forgetting. That's a brilliant line, because that is so true. I think all artists feel that, because we feel emotions so deeply, we don't want to lose them, you know. And I think obviously time erodes all emotions, especially feelings that you hold dear. You know, you just end up moving on. But I think through your art, you can have that window into something that's real and something that you really did feel. And so, yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And also, you've done the second part about intimacy. I think as a poet also, that's why I can, relay on that level. I can't make art or draw art that's intimate, but when the words, or when I talk about a relationship, when I talk about something, I'm not talking about it specifically. And sometimes I might talk about like two or three all boiled into one, because there's a intimacy that I felt all through, or there's a through line, and it's like that kind of revealing a little bit, but also not revealing fully. That like in between that, I think for me, it's where that intimacy kind of shows up. And I think it's brilliant, it's beautiful when all artists do it, because it just shows like we're human beings. We're just trying to like express something that's real. So like, thank you for doing that. I think it's super, super cool.
But you know what? I'm super glad you get it, because sometimes some people don't care about remembering.
Yeah.
I used to have a partner that he was forgetful, but in a sense of that if you tell him like, oh, do you remember that thing that we did 9 months ago? He was like, did we do that? But honestly, and this is, I actually put that in a drawing of mine. It's like, some people don't mind about forgetting. I just think that's a bliss. That's so blissful, because as humans, we tend to forget, like, regardless.
Yeah,
this is literally how our brains are wired, right? So if you don't want to forget, you have to put lots of effort into recording in any way that you like, but still you have to do it. But if you don't care, you kind of free of that.
Oh, you also lose the emotion beforehand, right?
But those people don't care.
That is true.
And in a way,
I know what you say.
Maybe it is more healthy to live in the present, because I have this horrible habit I've been trying to unlearn of living in the past. It's not healthy. It's very toxic. Maybe toxic is a heavy word, but my point is, maybe they have a point, and I don't know.
I agree. I just call it me being romantic. I just think it's that romanticism. Is that kind of, because I do agree with you. I've had a conversation with this with my friend many a times, and they're like, why do you care? And then I'm like, I can't help but care. And I think that makes a big part of who I am. And it translates into everything, right? It translates into how I look at the world. I might care too much about a certain relationship, but it also means I care about a leaf or a tree when I see it. And I'm like, this is what I think it's about, feeling that flow of life a little bit more, a little bit deeper, drinking deeper and being like, ooh, okay, cool. Even this might hurt me, this might be painful, but
I'd rather remember.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so interesting for us. And I think it's the interest that fascinates us, right? Is that kind of like, this is actually more real almost to live on this kind of side of it. Speaking of which, I think there's an art that I saw of yours that really struck me, really spoke to me. I titled it, and we were talking about it before, I titled it Charcoal at Night, on Charcoal at Night.
I totally get that, by the way. I will steal it from you. No copyright edit.
Yes, yeah. But again, the reason why it spoke to me, if I can remember properly, it was because when I first saw it, obviously it's the dark kind of like, and again, I'm not an artist, so I'm not like an art.
Go for it.
But it's like the dark kind of style, by the face you can see, but because it's balanced against that kind of background, which is completely dark, and he's obviously wearing some dark, but you can't see it. It's blending in with the dark, the background, right? But his face, even though it's a mask, still has emotion on it. And then it's weird, right? And then like whatever he was playing with, like whatever his hands are, you can't really see. It's not really clear. But I think that emotion of the darkness of it, I think it just kind of like straight. I was like, oh, I relate to that. I don't know why I relate to that character. I don't know why. Which I wanted to ask you, what were you thinking? What was the idea there? Because I don't know why I'm relating to, but I'm relating to something.
I'm loving this because you will laugh so much
Sure.
on my process because it's so, like, honestly, it's so sweet because it's so much simpler than that. But Chris, I'm sorry, I have to ask you, what is the emotion that you see on the mask, on the helmet? Because it's a helmet.
It's you know all those feelings that you get? It's like a kind of like acceptance, but like gloomy, but like kind of like
Serious.
yeah, like a serious gloomy acceptance of fate. Kind of. I think that kind of backdrop of the darkness of it. And now you said it's simpler than that, and I'm feeling like I'm making
I'm
it
taking it though.
more of nothing.
Like, imagine if it was the opposite. Imagine if it was so much effort into a word, and then the
like,
audience is like, that looks like the banana on the wall with the tape thing.
Yes.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
so basically, that is literally, and again, I'm a bit ashamed to say this because there's not much originality behind it. I was going around London with my camera. I passed in front of this antiques store, but like historical antiques, like selling marbles from whatever. And one of the windows, so inside I think it was like completely dark, like there was nobody inside. That's why the black background. And simply it was literally a display window where there was this, I don't know, medieval, really Roman helmet, see, hanging obviously. So you wouldn't see the stem of metal behind it. So it was
Thank you.
holding suspense in the window. And then at the bottom, on the shelf, there was this tiny vase with the two flowers, the two stems. So from real life, you would see obviously the interior of the gallery and a piece of metal holding the helmet above in the display, whatever.
Oh, so they weren't even attached. It was like metal, and then
It was literally like, imagine like base, metal, probably like a ball, and the helmet was like on it, like it was a head basically. That's it.
What made you take a picture of that? What drew you back?
I was like, oh, what a cool window display.
So you felt the emotion I felt. That's how you
I
felt.
probably say it. That's why I was like, wow, it's like, bless you, you're reading so much poetry into this, so much emotions. Because honestly, I took a picture, I was like, that's a cool picture. And sometimes I take a picture, I'm like, that would be a cool painting. Or let me draw the. Again, there's no point. There's no thought process of the emotion, the helmet, or making it an actual work of art. I was just like, I'll sketch the picture. And I did like actually the fact that it's because from the picture it gets that dark background that you're saying. I was like, I like that the helmet looks like suspended there, and then you have those two stems. You only see the two stems, the vase. That's it. So I was like, I'll just draw what it came out from the picture, which I didn't see in real life. Again, the photography being like a layer between reality and then the drawing. Sometimes it works because the lens is seeing something or it's manipulating the image in a way that you would not see otherwise.
I'm fascinated. Even like the third, I think I'm fascinated about the second order effects of that. So like, yes, you see something, you take that, you create the art, and then I see something else based on what you've created. What do you think about that also? Like people's tendency to like see more in an artist's kind of painting than is actually there. Like it's even see less, like you're talking before.
I love that. So let me explain. I do think the audience has their own right to manipulate the interpretation of a work of art in their own volition. This being said, if as an artist that bothers you, then it's within your own capacity to put explanation. And then I do think people have to respect that once it's been published or posted or announced or whatever, or explained. That sometimes bothers me when people completely misread or misinterpret. And obviously, you can afford them because if they don't know, they don't know, right? They're just trying to read it with their own best tools and best knowledge that they have of this image that you made. No, actually, I'll take that back because if people misinterpret before having the information, again, I cannot fault you for that. And sometimes it's also a positive misinterpretation, as you literally just did, because it's like, I'll take it. If you're saying that you see this man with emotions, I'll take it. It's a good interpretation. It's not like you're manipulated to make it seem less. You actually manipulated to make it seem more than what it actually is. What bothers me though is when I say what it is, I say where it comes from or what it is about. Sometimes all those three things together, and people still go like, I think this is about the fishes that you saw in Geneva at the aquarium. I'm like,
It's a very specific example.
I'm trying to say shit on top of my head.
I'm joking.
But yeah, sometimes you get that thing of, or they say like, this reminds me of this other thing that is completely not related. You're like, fine. And like you learn to kind of like scoff it off and be like, sure, it's that, sure.
The misunderstood artist, I think about that a lot because
How do you feel about your poetry?
yeah, I mean, it is interesting too because it does happen even in poetry. Even when I'm literally saying a word, because there's a little bit of like, mystique behind
Safe
it.
to read.
Yeah, and that's on purpose. So sometimes they'll read way too much into it. My friends sometimes be like, "Are you okay? I read this poem," and I was like, "What do you mean?" I was just feeling like, I guess in that moment I was just feeling like I was using those words. Sometimes it's just the word that rhymes. It's just like this word works for this sentence. But they'll be like that one word, like they'll just read way too much into it. And that's like you were saying, like if it's a positive interpretation, you go, oh, that's fair, I'll take that.
Yeah.
For the negative ones, you go like, oh, I'm not sure about that. I think maybe let's reel it back and like you can just ask me when you ever need to know.
And you're right, sometimes it's just practical choices
enveloped
into something. And people are like, oh, you must be taking inspiration from Velasquez.
Yes.
And I'm like, maybe.
Now that you mention it.
Possibly, sure.
Okay, our next question I want to ask, and this has been an amazing conversation. Let's bring it home. There's been fascinating development as we've gone on. This is very, very you've done incredibly well. So thank you. This is amazing. Like this is like really like high stakes interview. So well done.
Honestly, I'm married to the host.
But okay, so I've thought often about the role fear plays in artist's journey, right? I think one of the first, I guess, genesis of an artist is getting over that fear. Where fear of sharing your work, fear of yourself being seen, fear of all of that stuff there, right?
Yeah.
Two questions split into one. First off, how do you advise other artists to get over that fear? You got a really good line in one of the interviews that I watched. You go, fear is the man killer.
Yes.
Shout out to Dune. But yes, fear is the man killer. And how do we fight against that, And then the second question is like, I think art is also one of the fears they have is fear of being perceived, fear of being understood and perceived. Do you have that fear? And again, what advice would you give to people about overcoming that?
I'm going to be that hypocrite person that is going to give the advice that then doesn't follow ourselves. So that's fine. Basically, regarding the first part of the question, the fear that stops creative people, the fear of being seen, the fear of the work being judged, or the fear of being bad at something. I think ultimately, and it gets easier with age. So sometimes make a nest in your fear if you have to. Cuddle yourself in it for a couple of years if you need to. Sometimes taking a step back from your work helps you to then propel you forward. But ultimately, I do think you have to do this thing that you're scared of. Same thing with me with colors. I had to do that one project in color to then fall in love with colors and painting in colors. If I had never done that, honestly, I don't know even what I would be drawing right now, because I would be limiting myself, as I've done for so many years, to only drawing instead of like experiencing other ranges of mediums, like from drawing to painting. Now, when it comes to fear being perceived, I'm still struggling with that. Like, unfortunately, we all know how important social media is for artists, and I hate it so much having to expose myself to the internet.
Sorry.
Yeah. So again, I'm giving you advice. Doesn't mean I'm 100% following it myself. Definitely still have so much work to do on myself, on my art. But yeah, again, the quote, like, fear is a mind killer. Don't let fear paralyze you or paralyze your creativity. And sometimes letting go, taking yourself less seriously, at least that was my experience, helped reducing the fear so much. Because if you lower the stakes to yourself, then of course it's gonna feel less scary to fail. Like, if you think that your art has to be award-winning,
Yes, yeah, exactly.
oh my god, you can, of course, every time you're gonna open your sketchbook, be terrified of making a mess and making an ugly drawing, no? Because everything has to be to the standard. If you lower it, maybe that's a better advice.
Lower your standards.
On yourself. Have high standards for your work. Lower your standard on yourself. Because, again, the whole point of a sketchbook is to make messy drawings, to make messy work. Fuck up, fuck around, find out, like, have fun. And even if it sounds so empty, but I promise, the whole point is to lower the perception that your art, poetry, sketches, whatever, has to be cookie cut perfect or incredibly invoking. Like, again, to me, dabbing into my flower charm guys has been so liberating, because sometimes you just need to draw a silly fish, and that's okay.
That's okay. That's perfect.
Okay.
Final question then. What role do you think art plays in life? What meaning do you think art brings to life? For you, speaking only for you, what role do you think art brings to your life, and even also in general too, as you see the world of art? What meaning is art in life, essentially?
I think for me, and this obviously is influence on the way that I perceive and make art. Again, is to experience beauty, and maybe even more than beauty, because that feels very limiting and very conventional. Maybe the point of art in life is catharsis, because I think that with music, for example, it doesn't have to be a pretty song or the most beautiful orchestra, whatever. But if it propels something from you, and sometimes that's all that you need while you're struggling with your romantic life or taxes or your stupid fucking boss. You need to put your headphones in and shake it, or open your sketchbook and, plunge your pencil into that. So maybe catharsis, I would say. Because as humans, we need an outlet. And honestly, I'm sorry, this just came into my mind. And I really want to say it because I used to feel so angry about this. I remember when COVID hit, and all that we could all do was emotionally relying on books, on animations, on movies, on music, maybe I said music again, on art, or on making. So not even just consuming art, but like making something, making art. And I'm saying making art even if you're not a professional, even if you're somebody that is literally like, I have a friend that, for example, she paints, those canvases with numbers on. You buy a canvas with already a drawing inside and a number.
And then
And you paint it's called paint by number, I think. even if you do that, which is literally like it's literally a canvas telling you where to put the colors, fine, that works for you. And I remember how desperate we were and how much strongly we clinged into those things. And I'm sorry, this is not to put like to make like a war on fields, but I don't remember anybody clinging to accounting money.
Absolutely.
Or finance.
Absolutely.
Or I don't know.
Literally any
Let's open or like let's open the constitution of my country.
Yeah, let's read it. Yeah, no.
Even if all of those things are super incredibly useful and necessary, that's the role of arts. I think that is the perfect context example. Very weird situation to be in, but that really showed us the value of.
I completely agree. I think that reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite movies. The movie is called Dead Poor Society.
Yes, of course.
And there's that scene, we know that scene where he's like, art, beauty, love. This is what we live
for.
So 100%, I think 100% agree. I think it's beautiful to see you express that. Thank you for your time today. I think this has been amazing. Like just getting to spend time with you, speaking to you, just seeing how incredibly articulate and just like how your mind works and, how your influences of your art. I mean, your art is incredible too, but like I said, I wanted to really show the person behind the art. So I hope they've seen that today because I think it's really important. I think you're an incredible person. So thank you for your time today.
Honestly, thank you. This has been incredibly fun. And I'm so glad our path crossed in such a roundabout way as well. And thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible. So really, thank you.
Thank you. You've done really, really well. Like I said, this was an extreme score type of recording. So thank you so much for.
But I'm so natural because again, it's so interesting to talk with you. Even if I feel like obviously I monopolize the conversation. Usually I tend to let other people talk as well.
No, of course. And this is my point. Like the point was to let you speak because I think you had so much and you've done really well.
Much fun.
So thank you so much, man.
No, thank you.
All right, guys, until next time. Peace.
Bye.